The Alberta Pork Congress 2008 is proud to present the Feed Right Lifetime Achievement Award to Dr. John Patience.
I'm John Patience, and I'm the president of the Prairie Swine Center in Saskatoon.
John, could you describe the early years and your exposure to the livestock industry?
Well, I was born and raised on a mixed farm in southern Ontario, which ultimately specialized in hogs. And then when I went to university, I went to the University of Guelph and studied animal science, and then got a master's degree in animal nutrition. At that point, I was very, very fortunate because I was able to get the job of my dreams at that point, and that was to become an extension worker, and I got that job in Regina working with Saskatchewan Agriculture and Food. After 3 years of that, I moved to Saskatoon and worked as a nutritionist with Federated Co-op before going back to university and getting my PhD in animal nutrition at Cornell University. And I knew at that point that I was destined to work in the pig industry when I had originally intended to study poultry nutrition. And went to the poultry science department at Cornell. And one day my supervisor came in and said, "John, I've got the perfect project for you. It's in swine." And I knew at that point that my career was destined to be working in the pig industry.
Why such dedication to the pork industry?
Well, I consider myself to be extremely fortunate to be working with the pork industry here in Canada. Pork producers have distinguished themselves by a strong desire to improve themselves, to become better producers, more efficient producers, producing a better quality product, and to do it in a sustainable manner. And when you're a researcher developing new information, you couldn't ask for a better circumstance when the producers are interested in the work that you do. And in particular, I find it very interesting working with pork producers and people in the pork industry because they're always very interested in new ideas.
Could you share with us some of your most notable achievements?
When I look back over my 30-year career working in the pork industry, I guess there's a number of things that I'm particularly proud of. I'm most proud of the relationship that I and the Prairie Swine Center have with the pork industry, and the way we're able to work together, that information flows from the center, and that we get feedback from the industry to help us keep on track and continue to do work that's important to the pork industry. I think that would be perhaps my number one accomplishment. But in addition to that, in my own personal research program, by developing and maintaining and emphasizing a focus on doing things that will maximize net income rather than maximizing productivity. Because at the end of the day, and particularly as our industry becomes much more complex, we have to focus on the bottom line.
John, throughout your career, how did you balance family and travel?
Well, I've been very, very fortunate with my family life. My wife, fortunately, is very understanding because I do a lot of travel, and so I'm away from home quite a bit. But I was particularly fortunate when my children were growing up, because I live in a small city, that I was able to coach my 3 children in baseball as they were growing up and attending their dance recitals and music recitals and so on. So I had a very good family life, and that certainly kept a balance on my professional career.
Looking back, are there any changes that you would make in your career and or the industry?
It's a very difficult question to answer. I think in terms of my own professional career and personal life, I really can't suggest that I would want to change anything. I really consider myself very fortunate to have been in the right places at the right times. With respect to the industry, I think the pork producers in Western Canada have done an excellent job over the last 15 to 20 years to position themselves to be competitive suppliers of high quality pork in the global marketplace. But I think all of us in the pig industry wish that we had anticipated or better understood the impact of the exchange rate on our competitiveness in the global marketplace and had addressed that before it became such an acute situation.
John, with the knowledge you have accumulated over the years, share with us some of the key publications and events you have helped to initiate.
Well, when I moved to Western Canada in the mid-1970s, that was a period of great development in the pig industry and a much greater sense of specialization in the industry. And so I was able to be involved in the writing of the first edition of the Swine Nutrition Guide with Dr. Phil Thacker. And then in 1995, we actually did a second edition with Dr. Kees de Lange. In terms of events, again, for the same reason, I was involved in starting up the Saskatchewan Pork Industry Symposium, as well as the Western Nutrition Conference, and an event that ultimately became the Saskatchewan Pork Expo.
What are some factors that you would consider to be important to the future of our industry?
Well, that's a very big question, but I think fundamentally, to start with, anybody who's going to be in the industry has to be really familiar with the competition. And we're competing with pork producers from around the world, so I think it's important for anybody starting out in the industry to understand industries that exist in North and South America as well as Europe and Asia. I think number two, probably pork producers of the future are going to have to be very, very good with numbers. And the focus will be on dollars and cents and record keeping, and that has always been important in our industry, but it will become critical in the future, grinding our costs down as far as possible and extracting as much revenue from the marketplace as possible as well. And then I think the final component is to remember that our industry is cyclical. It'll probably continue to be cyclical, and that means that we have to prepare in the good times to be able to deal with the bad times.
With that in mind, how do you envision the future?
We obviously have some issues that we're going to have to deal with. Number one, the high grain prices, I think, are going to be here with us for a long period of time. Maybe not as high as they are right now, but fundamentally they've elevated to a new level. And I think as a consequence of that, the price of pork, which has elevated to a new level about every 12 to 15 years in the past, is about to do so again. And it'll have to in order to compensate for the increase in the grain prices. I think we have to think about things like the ethanol industry, and we know fundamentally that the ethanol industry as it exists today is not going to exist in the long term. There may be ethanol production, but it will be of a different form, and that's going to have an impact on the grain prices as well. But I also think for our industry to move forward, we need a very strong packing industry. We need to be able to address the exchange rate, because there's no reason to believe that that's going to change very much in the future. And I think fundamentally as an industry, our success in the future will be dependent on the leadership that we have in our industry. And with good leadership, I'm sure that our industry has an excellent future.
Congratulations to Dr. John Patience, the 2008 recipient of the Feed Right Lifetime Achievement Award.